silence of the house was the loudest sound I knew. It had been 6 months since Arthur passed, and I, Eleanor, was still navigating the quiet echo of his absence. He wasn't just my husband, he was the curator of our life, a man who found stories in the grain of old wood and the scent of aging paper. His study, a room I'd left untouched, was his sanctuary. Now, it was a fortress I had to breach, filled with memories and stacks of books that seemed to hold their breath. My son, Mark, and his new wife, Chloe, were visiting. Their visits had become more frequent, layered with a crisp, modern concern that felt alien to me. Chloe, especially, was a whirlwind of polished efficiency. She was beautiful, sharp, and always seemed to be appraising our home not as a place of memories, but as a collection of assets. "Eleanor, you can't just live in a museum," Chloe said that afternoon, her voice smooth as silk. She ran a perfectly manicured finger along the edge of Arthur's prized possession, a massive mahogany roll-top desk that dominated the study. "This room has such good bones, but it's heavy." Mark, ever the diplomat, chimed in. "She's right, Mom. We've been thinking. This house is too much for you. We found a lovely new condo development downtown. Secure, modern, clean. And the equity from this place," Chloe added, "would set you up for life. We could handle the sale. In fact, I found a specialist buyer for this desk, an antique collector in Zurich. He's willing to offer an incredible price, sight unseen, based on the photos I sent." I bristled. Sell Arthur's desk? He'd spent decades behind it, his hands a familiar shadow on its worn leather inlay. "I'm not ready for that, Chloe." It's just a piece of furniture, Mom," Mark said, his tone gently impatient. He worked in finance, and to him, everything had a number. "Chloe is trying to help. The offer is substantial. It would cover your moving costs completely." "Let me think about it," I said, a polite dismissal, but Chloe didn't relent. "He needs an answer by tomorrow, Eleanor. These international collectors are very decisive." A prickle of unease, sharp and sudden, ran down my spine. Decisive? Or predatory? That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked into the study, the moonlight painting stripes across the floor. I sat in Arthur's chair. It still smelled faintly of him, pipe tobacco and old books. On an impulse, I called the only person I knew who loved old things as much as Arthur had. Mr. Harrison, our family's semi-retired lawyer and Arthur's old chess partner. "Harrison," I whispered into the phone, "I'm sorry to call so late. Can you come by tomorrow? I need an appraisal. For the house. For probate." It was a lie, but it was the only shield I could think of. "Of course, Eleanor. Anything for you. Is everything all right?" "I'm not sure," I admitted, and that, at least, was the truth. The next morning, while waiting for Harrison, I decided to truly look at the desk, to catalog its contents before Chloe's buyer could claim it. I emptied the small pigeonholes. Old fountain pens, receipts from the 1980s, a magnifying glass. I ran my hands along the inside, just as Arthur used to. My fingers brushed against a small carved rosette on the side panel, a detail I'd never noticed. It wasn't just decorative. It depressed under my thumb. With a soft snick, a thin panel below the main writing surface popped open, revealing not a drawer, but a shallow, hidden compartment. My Inside was a single leather-bound ledger and a thick manila envelope. My name, Eleanor, was written on the envelope in Arthur's unmistakable, elegant script. With trembling hands, I opened the ledger first. It wasn't accounts. It was a journal. Arthur's last journal. The first entry was dated 2 days after Mark and Chloe's wedding, October 14th. Mark seems happy. The girl, Chloe, is polished. Too polished. She mentioned her family's shipping business in Greece. I have contacts in Athens. I will make inquiries. Something about her smile doesn't match her eyes. I flipped through the pages, my breath catching. Arthur, my quiet, unassuming husband, had been conducting an investigation. November 2nd. No record of a Kara shipping family. Her university credentials don't check out. She is a ghost. She speaks knowledgeably about finance, yet she claims to be an art historian. The stories clash. December 18th. I saw her at the bank. She was meeting with a man I didn't recognize. She handed him an envelope. She looked frightened. But when she saw me, her expression changed instantly to one of pleasant surprise. The transition was flawless. She's an actress. The last entry was from a week before he died, February 5th. Her real name is not Chloe Karas. It's Anya Petrova. She has a history. I found court records from another state. A business partner who lost his entire inheritance. The case was dismissed. Lack of evidence. She covers her tracks. She is after the house. She thinks my desk holds my financial papers. She has been in here. I can smell her perfume. I must protect Eleanor. I've moved the essentials. I dropped the journal. Anya Petrova. I opened the manila envelope. It didn't contain stock certificates or bonds. It contained something far more personal. There were copies of the court records Arthur mentioned, and beneath them, a simple, folded deed for 20 acres of wooded land upstate, purchased in 1978 for almost nothing. Arthur had always called it his wilderness. I'd thought it was a patch of trees. A handwritten note was clipped to it. My dearest Eleanor, they are building a new tech campus nearby. This land is no longer just trees. It is your independence. Do not let her take this house. It is our home. But if you must, this is your armor. Trust Harrison. I love you. The doorbell rang. It was Mr. Harrison. I led him to the study, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the ledger. He read it in silence, his face growing darker with every page. He read the note. He looked at the deed. Good Lord, Arthur, he whispered. He looked at me, his eyes sharp. This buyer from Zurich, what's the name? I don't know, I said. Chloe handled everything. Of course she did. Harrison pulled out his phone. Eleanor, I need you to trust me. I'm going to make a call. Then I want you to call Mark and Chloe. Tell them you agree to the sale. Tell them the buyer can pick up the desk today. What? Harrison, no. Trust me, he said, his voice firm. And trust Arthur. We are not going to sell this desk. We are going to catch a thief. An hour later, Mark and Chloe arrived, triumphant. Chloe was radiant. Oh, Eleanor, that's wonderful. You see, it's so much better to be decisive. The transport company is on its way. You work fast, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm very organized, she smiled. Mark, darling, why don't you help your mother in the kitchen? Get her some tea. This must be so emotional. She wanted me out of the room. I let Mark lead me away, my heart pounding a rhythm of fear and betrayal. A large, unmarked white van pulled up. 2 men in plain overalls came to the door. Chloe directed them, a picture of calm authority. The large desk in the study. Be careful, it's extremely valuable. I stood in the kitchen doorway watching them maneuver the heavy piece through the hall. Mark looked uneasy. Mom, are you sure about this? Before I could answer, a dark sedan pulled into the driveway, blocking the van. Mr. Harrison got out, along with 2 other men in sharp suits. That's far enough, gentlemen, Mr. Harrison called out. The movers paused, confused. Chloe's head snapped toward the door, her smile vanishing. Who are you? This is a private sale. I am Eleanor's attorney, Harrison said, walking calmly into the house. And these gentlemen are private investigators. We have a question about this buyer in Zurich. Chloe's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. This is harassment. Is it? One of the investigators said, holding up a tablet. Because the Zurich account you provided belongs to a shell corporation that was dissolved 3 months ago. The funds were being routed to a domestic account in Delaware, registered to an Anya Petrova. Is that name familiar? Mark looked from the investigator to his wife. Chloe? What is he talking about? Who is Anya? Chloe. Anya didn't look at her husband. Her eyes, now cold and flat, were fixed on me. She knew. You found it, she hissed. The old fool. He did hide something. He hid everything, I said, stepping forward, Arthur's journal in my hand. He saw you from the very beginning. Mark's face crumpled. Chloe, tell me this isn't true. She laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. True? Of course it's true. You were so easy, so desperate to please, so desperate to fix your mother's life. This house, this junk, it was my payday. You were just the key to the door. Get out, Mark whispered, his voice cracking. I'm not going anywhere without that desk. She lunged for it, but the investigators were faster, blocking her path. Ma'am, one said, I believe you'll be coming with us. We have a warrant here related to charges of identity fraud and conspiracy. As they escorted her out, she shot one last look at Mark. You're a fool, Mark. Just like your father, the van, the investigators, and the woman I knew as Chloe were gone. The desk sat in the hallway, a silent witness. Mark sank onto the stairs, his head in his hands. He didn't cry. He just sat, broken, in the house he'd been so eager to sell. I said nothing. I walked back to the kitchen and made him the cup of tea his wife had suggested. I brought it to him. He took it, his hand shaking. She was right, Mom. I am a fool. Dad tried to tell me. He asked me about her family, about her finances. I told him he was being paranoid. I told him to back off. He knew you loved her, I said, sitting beside him. He didn't want to break your heart. He just wanted to protect you. That evening, Mark and I pushed the heavy desk back into the study. It felt like restoring a piece of our family. We sat in the quiet room, the scent of old paper and wood polish comforting us. Mark picked up Arthur's journal. Can I? He asked. I nodded. He opened it and began to read, not the investigation, but the earlier entries. Entries about a young boy learning to ride a bike, about a father's pride at a college graduation, about a man who loved his family so deeply he spent his final months building one last line of defense. "I never really knew him, did I?" Mark said, his voice thick. "I think," I said, placing my hand over his, "you're just starting to." The house was quiet again, but it was no longer the silence of absence. It was the silence of memory, of healing. It was the sound of a father's love reaching across time and finally being heard